Good morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour for the 16th year of Changi, the leap 6th month, and the 13th day of the heavenly calendar. I may have been giving out the wrong date because I just realized that the calendar here beside me had not been flipped. I was still looking at last month's calendar, and I'm not sure if maybe it was flipped, but then it flipped back down, or anyway, today is the 13th day. I may have been giving different dates. I hope not. No, I think I had it right? 10, 11, 12, 13. But anyway, today's the 13th day. That is something I'm sure of. 13th day of the 6th leap month. Leap June. No, not leap 6th month. We got to get through this quickly. I guess it's going to take, 29 days to get through it. Yes, we still have 16 days. We still have 16 days of this leap 6th month. I can't get through it quickly enough. Anyway, okay, here we are. And first of all, I wanted to, by the way, I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second king of Changu, Kyung. And first, I wanted to introduce an email that I received from one of our queens who is watching. She says she's never missed one episode. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sometimes I sort of I think to myself, wow, people are actually watching this. Whoa, I better watch out. Anyway, last week we were talking about, or I was talking about, fathers saying that, okay, there are martyrs and there are martyrs, there are people who say, okay, well, if I die for the sake of God, then I'll be saved, and so I'll go ahead and do that. So they kind of selfishly die for the sake of, they selfishly die. And he contrasted that for people who truly die for the sake of God. And but I was having difficulty understanding what Father meant by those who selfishly die. And she wrote me and said, you said it doesn't make much sense. I would argue this is a very important point in the life of faith. What is my motivation? Am I sacrificing my life, my time, my money for the purpose of getting myself into heaven, for my ancestors to be saved, for my family to be received, for my family to receive something from God? Or am I offering my life to God free of any hope for reward or bargaining? Any bargaining, yes. And I think that's an important point, and I understand it much more clearly now, and I appreciate that. There lies the core of the Christian heart. Even the most insignificant, stupid among us, if he has that unconditional heart, God's love will rush towards him. After all, this is the purpose of creation. That is why Father said, those martyrs who were ready to die for the sake of God, to be saved and be near God in the spirit world. Praise God. Thank you very much. I appreciate that kind of feedback, especially that kind of feedback. But any feedback is fine. Any feedback is fine. All right. Let's continue here. We are going through the series of 3 talks that Father gave in January 1973 at Belvedere to an audience of European members who had come over from Europe to the United States to participate in the U.S. Providence. And Mrs. Wonpok Che is translating. Many of us remember Mrs. Che, as she was a very wonderful person, and Father certainly loved her. We loved her. She was loved all around. Well, most all around. Her relationship with Hak Jahan was tense, shall we say, and uh, it was tense. She was kind of in a mother-in-law position, I would say. It was her part of her mission was to teach Hak Jahan many things, as a mother-in-law would teach a daughter-in-law. And well, even certainly in the secular world, such relationships can be, not always are, but can be tense. And this was certainly true with Mrs. Che and Hak Jahan. Anyway, so, but but uh, yeah, okay, let's leave it at that for now. Okay. So here we finished off here with this paragraph. If at the command of a father, and as I mentioned, back in those days, I guess some people were translating Chunim as a master. I think even in October '74 when I joined, I don't think that was common anymore. I think people were referring to father as father back then. Um, and my guess is that Mrs. Youngwon Kim's Dr. Youngwon Kim's influence was strong in this translation of master. She Youngwon Kim Youngwon Kim had an interesting relationship with her father. Let's just put it that way. And I think anyway, so master would be consistent with her understanding or her relationship with father. But I joined in October '74, and so January '75, right? Yeah, January '75 was when Mr. Ken Sudo, started giving lectures at Berrytown. Actually, a couple of weeks before that, but especially January. Uh, and he definitely did not use the term master. It was very definitely he was referring to father there. Yeah. So anyway, if at the command of true father, you have to die fighting against communism in a communist country, would you do that? I would not like to happen, but you must be prepared for that. And of course, that actually did happen in Czechoslovakia, I know, and then I think one other country as well. But anyways, here we go. Since he had to go through all different stages, beginning from servanthood. Well, wait a second, I'm not sharing this with you. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay. Since he had to go through all the different stages, beginning from servanthood. So, where do you think he began his mission? In what way? So here, Father's referring to the vertical 8 stages, kind of indirectly. Of course, the vertical 8 stages, if you've studied OSDP, you know what I'm talking about. It's the servant of servants, servant, adopted son, and son of the concubine, direct son, and then the mother position, the father position, and then God's position. So, or the parent's position, I guess. Yes. No, God's position. So eight stages have to be restored in the course of restoration because those were all taken by Satan. So here he had to go through all the different stages. So this is way before OSDP, so he's not saying vertical 8 stages yet, but the different stages, that's what that refers to. Beginning from the position of servanthood, well, or servant of servants. Where do you think he began his mission? In what way? Have you ever stopped to think of that? He had to go through the dungeon of dungeons, the hell of hells. You can never imagine what he had to go through. If he was to start his mission somewhere in the middle, he could not save the people in the rear. So he went to the extreme end or bottom to save those people, not leaving anyone behind. This is something that I've noticed, that when Father went to America, where did he begin? He did not go to a community that would be the most receptive to his message in America, right? Where did he begin? He began in New York City, which is, if you were strategizing in a sense, if someone were strategizing, you might want to go to maybe the Bible Belt, for example, right? And remember that when Father first arrived in the United States, he was actually welcomed by many people. It was not until late 73 and the whole Watergate thing, when the Father came out with a series of, not a series, but one full-page ad that he placed in New York Times, Washington Post, and many, many other newspapers around the country, calling on Americans to forgive, love, and unite with respect to President Nixon. It wasn't until then that Father really became sort of controversial. Before then, every place he went, pretty much, he was being given the key to the city. The governors were giving out proclamations, Sunmunde or whatever it was, various proclamations. And this is a matter of record. So you would think that, okay, if he were, maybe he could begin in the Bible Belt, maybe, Nashville or someplace like that, right? But no, he began in one of the places where there was probably this most difficult environment, which would be New York City, perhaps. There are other places like LA and other places, but he wanted to take control of New York City, because New York City like the saying goes, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. He wanted to start at the most difficult place, because if he started at the easy place, then how would he save the people in New York City then? If he were to start in Nashville, for example, and even if he was successful in Nashville, or successful in Memphis, or successful in other places like that, people who live in the worst environments would not be saved. And his idea, or his mission is to bring salvation, at least the opportunity of salvation, to every single person in the world. So yes, he began to the extreme end or bottom to save those people, not leaving anyone behind. Okay. Okay. He chose to put himself in that position. Why? What did I tell you about cutting off your head? What did I tell you about cutting off your head? What did I do? Okay, I think there's a question mark missing there. Would you have God do that, or would you prefer to do that yourself? Father, being a representative of all the people of the world, would like to put himself in that position. If he remained with folded hands without doing anything, do you think that God's ideal could be realized? In fact, he should have started this mission through the prepared nation, with the tribe, family, all those things already there. But all those things being multiplied and not being brought about, he had to start all over again from the bottom. Yes, and so this is because the person or people who were supposed to be in the John the Baptist position did not fulfill their responsibility. And there were many people that we say, okay, that person is John the Baptist, or that person is John the Baptist, but there was one critical person. And if you've studied Father's life in the early years of his mission, then you will have heard the name of Kim Beng-mun. And my understanding is that Kim Beng-mun was the capital J, capital B, John the Baptist. Okay, so he was the one who needed to unite with Father, and apparently there was a pretty good chance that he would, but he could not overcome his ego. He had to start over again from the bottom. And of course, even now, there are people who are sort of acting in that capacity, perhaps, but no one has really succeeded in doing that to the extent that Father needed. He would not allow Satan to come and capture him, but he would, from his own accord, fall down to the bottom and save the world by serving the world. What he had gone through is more than the scene of Gethsemane for Jesus. By serving servants, or the last or the least, I think maybe this maybe should be least, maybe the least of evil people or the worst of evil people, he had to build and pave the road for his followers to follow. He did not complain, even though he may have had to throw away the throne as a prince of God and come to the servitude of mankind by putting himself in the dungeon and hell of the world. He was in the position of not only a servant, but of a servant of servants. And of course, we see finally, this is the beginning point of the vertical 8-stage restoration. He came down to the very bottom in order to save everyone there. Yes. And so as followers of True Father, we are walking in his path at some level, right? Not nearly, we're not going to Hungnam ourselves, but we are at some level walking in a similar path. And so we also start out in a position of a servant of servants. When he had to go through life in prison, that was something miserable, a dungeon of dungeons. At that moment, God was so grieved. He didn't want to grieve God's heart, so he would turn away from God so that God would not see what he was going through. But God was always there helping him. In many instances, God appeared and helped him. If you had the knowledge of everything Father had to go through, you could not lift your face before him. Even before some of you were born or were still young, he was already going through those trials. He found many disciples in the prison, like the 12 disciples of Jesus. And this is a reference to the Hungnam experience where Father was able to gather 12 disciples there without actually witnessing to them verbally, at least not physically, right? But people had revelations and so forth. And he had 12 disciples, like the 12 disciples of Jesus. The basic number of elder members were found right there in prison. The people, the Christians, as well as the government, the nation wanted to kill him, not to speak of the communists. He went through many instances where death was waiting for him. Now in Korea, no Christian or government officials can get to our movement. They are more or less in favor of our movement. So this is 1973, and Korea was going through a 7-year period that began in 1972 and lasted until 1979. And this was a period referred to at the time as well, and also in history as the Yushin period. And in 1972, the President Park Chung-hee declared a state of emergency for the country and really locked down the country. And you'll read in the autobiography how Father barely got out of the country before that emergency declaration was made. He basically made it out of the country on the last flight. And if he had not gotten out on that particular day, the next day he would not have been able. In fact, the next day, virtually no one was allowed to leave the country then for the next 7 years. 7 years plus, actually. It was a bit, well, at least 7 years. And so, but here, Father was supporting the government of Park Chung-hee because of its strong anti-communist stance. And Park Chung-hee certainly, in terms of human rights, did not live up to the standards, shall we say, of well, certainly, he did not live up to the standards of Cheongguk Constitution, and many times people's human rights were violated. That is certainly true. But as I've mentioned before, God always focuses on the good within us and has give and take with that good, and then nurtures that good so that it grows, and so that the person can get closer and closer to God, whereas Satan will pick us apart and find something evil within us, and then he will accuse us using our evil so as to try and separate us from God more and more. And Father focused on Park Chung-hee's anti-communist stance, which was certainly very necessary then. And prior to Park Chung-hee, the situation when Park Chung-hee had his conducted a coup d'etat in 1962 was that Korean society was ripe for takeover by communist elements. And Park Chung-hee, I think it's safe to say, prevented that. And he also really laid the foundation for Korea to become the economic power that it is today. So there are good points and bad points of Park Chung-hee, and many people today in today's Korea actually appreciate what Park Chung-hee did much more than I think people were aware of back then. So anyway, no Christian or government officials can get to a movement, and they are more or less in favor of our movement. Okay, all right. Okay, they now realize that they cannot go without us and our young people, who are the ones putting our ideology into practice. And this may be a reference to the new village movement, the Semaul Undong, which was a government program that Park Chung-hee began, but it was inspired by something that Father was doing. And beginning in the 50s, I think probably around 55-ish, Father set a 40-day witnessing condition every year that began, I think, around July 20th and went for 40 days to the end of August. And this was a period when the young people that had joined the church who were mostly, by the way, college educated, or at least they were in college, would go out into the countryside and they would serve the people in the countryside. And this was a time when there was still a lot of illiteracy in Korea. And so they would teach people to read and write. Because remember, the Japanese masters during the Japanese rule outlawed speaking Korean and even studying Korean. All right. So there are many people who could not read Korean. And so they would go out and they would help people, help the older people, especially people who went through that period. And but anyway, they would also help build roads and stuff like that. And the new village movement, or Semaul Undong, was a program started by the government that was inspired by this annual program that Unification Church had of going into the countryside and helping people with various projects there in the countryside. And the Semaul movement is still going on officially. I still see their flags flying in many places, but it was inspired by Father. And so here, they cannot go without us or our young people, who are the ones putting our ideology into practice. I think this is a clear reference to that. When he was visiting the US and the world and many European countries, he shouted out to the world, and he had no opposition from the audience. That means that he was in the position of Jesus, crying out to the multitudes in the Roman Empire. All the people came in cooperation with him with no objection. In Jesus' days, because of the crucifixion of Jesus, he realized the resurrection of the people only on the spiritual level. But now, with Father here, he is going to make it a success, both spiritually and physically. So think, you have been born in this age, and I have met Father, walked hand in hand with him. You must be grateful for that. Jesus, in his life, was barely in the stage of the resurrection, of the restoration of the nation, but you are now in the stage of restoration of the worldwide level by working with him. So this is a miracle of miracles. You're working with him in your own lifetime. To really know and feel that. Yes, praise God. And that is still true today, by the way, because Father still is, although through his spiritual body, his physical body, of course, has now passed away, but Father himself is still leading the providence both in the spirit world and in the physical world. You must know that there is one thing you must be afraid of. If, after you have joined this movement, you would go astray and would do things opposite to those things that he would have you do, in that case, you should be fearful. But if you are ready to dedicate yourself in utter devotedness to carry out the mission with and through him, He is a loving Father to you with all love shining over you. Which way would you choose? If you are really sensitive to spiritual things, if you have not quite carried out your assigned mission and have been doing something else or thinking something else, when Father appears to you, you feel fearful and uncomfortable. However, if you follow in utter obedience to him, by carrying out your mission in place of him, you are privileged to shift your blood lineage into the purified one, the original, God's blood lineage. You can inherit what he has already won. You can possess the whole world. Can you imagine that you cannot find anywhere else in the world a place where you can enjoy this much? Then you must be afraid of not being told to do things. If he would let you go without doing things, that's when you should be afraid. If you are let alone, that's something to be concerned about. If I should let you alone, would you sit still and do nothing? Even though I may let you alone, if you do this and that and offer to work for him and ask him to send you out to the front line for the most difficult job, would Father scold or punish you for that? Now you know that much. Can you idle away your time on the mobile team? This is reference to the, I guess, not the MFT probably, but the mobile witnessing team, the crusades, right? The crusade teams, without doing anything. While your mobile team commander is away, you want to rest and relax. While he is there, you want to work, or you pretend to work. Can you be that way? Then in that case, you are committing double sin. You are evil in the sight of the commander, and he will say to you, I am watching. God will say the same thing, the same to you, and the members will see you from that angle. I hope and I believe that you will not do that. Can I trust you? If you want to, you can go ahead and do that and try to pretend to work when your leader is there and not work with folded hands when he isn't. But your conscience will not let you do that. You will be tortured in heart if you do that. When you have worked so hard during the whole day, and when you are in bed, you would have to lift your legs like this because you feel your legs hurt. Even though you have sore legs, you will be happy and satisfied for what you have done. You may have to groan in bed for the pain you feel in your legs, but you are grateful for what you have done, and God will love you. Since God will love you, you are satisfied with yourself, and people around you will look at you in the same mood. In that situation, even though you are in pain, when you look at your own hand, you will find it shining, your whole body gleaming, emitting life from God. You will find the whole room being ignited, lighted by yourself. That actually happens in that situation. Are you happy, unhappy, or happy? So we can say that you are the happiest people in the whole world. Well, you must be proud of yourselves. If you are gaunt and helpless and despair, would God like to see you? You have to keep your dignity as children of God. So far, I have told you because I wanted you to know that in order for you to be restored, there must be some toll of indemnity to be paid by you. But before you, I have gone through all those things to pave the way, to make your burden lighter than what it should be. Now let us talk about in what way, in what lineage Jesus was born. To shift the blood lineage is to bring the person back to the original place where the blood is not stained. Who was the first person whose blood was stained by the fall? Female or male? Female. After the fall between Cain and Abel, who nullified the providence of restoration? Cain. It was Eve as the mother who sowed the seeds of the fall, while the fruit of the fall was Cain and Abel. So in our study of the divine principle, we know about the cooperation between mother and son. Then in the providence of restoration, who is in the place of Eve? Because of the human fall, sinful descendants were multiplied out of the female. So we must restore the whole of mankind, but putting them in such a position as to go through a mother's womb and be given rebirth. Therefore, you must put yourself back in the womb of a mother having nothing to do with sin. That is why in the Bible, when Nicodemus asked Jesus how to be reborn, Jesus said, unless you go into your mother's womb again, you cannot be given rebirth. It was Nicodemus's question, how can I be given rebirth? Do I have to go into my mother's womb again? Jesus answered him, are you a teacher of Israel and yet you do not understand this? Jesus was speaking symbolically, of course. The word rebirth refers to resurrection. then how can you be given rebirth? And in what manner can you go back into your mother's womb to be given rebirth? Adam and Eve, due to their fall, gave birth to two children, and the firstborn was Cain. The secondborn was Abel. In the course of the fall, Eve caused the fall, and next was Adam. In that case, too, Cain nullified the restoration. But for the human fall, Adam had to dominate Eve. In this case, too, Abel had to dominate Cain. In the course of restoration, Adam must come first and Eve come next. Abel must come first and Cain must come next. That means we have to reverse the order in the course of restoration. By doing that, we will shift the blood lineage. Because of the human fall, everything came into the reverse order. So in life, you must shift your lineage. In the beginning, God created the archangel first and then man. But in terms of dominion, the secondborn or man, who was created after the archangel, must be in the dominating position. But due to the fall, dominion was shifted to the archangel or Satan. So to shift the powers is to shift everything. We must do that. In order to restore man to the original position, we must shift the position or shift the order. In the human fall, God dominated, or Eve dominated Adam. In the human fall, Eve dominated Adam. So now we must have Abel dominate Cain. Abel must be loved by God before Cain. Through Abel, Cain can be loved by God. So God received Abel's offering first because Abel was in the position to be loved by God. By Abel's offering being accepted by God, he could become one with God. So if Cain had to become one with Abel, he would have become one with God. But he failed to do that. And God's providence, centering on those two, was nullified. In the order of love, Abel was to be loved by God before Cain. So he was to come to the position of God on the right side, while Cain had to come on the left side. Is this clear to you? So the restoration providence between Abel and Cain, centering on Abel, was nullified there. Do you understand? Originally, Adam and Eve could not participate in the providence of restoration because they failed. They were directly stained by the fall. The restoration was possible through Abel and Cain. It's something like the idea that the subject can be realized through the object. So the subject partner can be realized through the object partner. At the time of Noah, through his faith in God and 120 years of preparation for God's providence to be carried out, he set an example of obedience to God in utter devotedness. So through Noah, God was to make his restoration providence a success. So through human history, the providence was narrowed down to be centered in one person. 2,000 years passed from the time of Cain up to that time. Through Noah and Adam, they reached Jacob. God failed in shifting the blood lineage because he had to work through two brothers separately born. To make things easier, who worked through the twin brothers, Jacob and Esau. Twin brothers have many things in common. When one has a certain feeling toward a certain matter or cause, the other will feel much the same. In having them to do that, God is narrowing down the scope of bloodship or lineage. Bloodship is a new word, isn't it? Bloodship or lineage. Well, obviously, lineage, of course, is Hjortong. Pitcher, maybe bloodship is Pitcher. Pitcher and Hjortong are the same thing. At the end, in order to be able to really shift the blood lineage, he has to do that at the same point. So he has to work through the twins. Do you understand? And then Father's writing on the board, since Jacob's family was in the position of Adam's family, we must know this. Adam caused the fall, and Cain was the first fruit of the fall. In this case, Rebekah was in the position of Eve, and Isaac was in the position of Adam. So those two must come into cooperation with each other. Now the reverse must take place. What did Eve do there? In the first place, Eve cheated God. What did Eve do first? She fell in love with Lucifer. Yes, that's from the audience. Yes, and by doing that, she cheated God because she did that without God's consent. Second, she cheated Adam. She cheated father and son. Rebekah, when she was in the position of Eve, had to undo that or do that in the reverse order. She had to cheat the father and son for the sake of goodness. Isaac was in the position of the father. Esau was in the position of son. Rebekah had to cheat the father and the son for the sake of goodness. Due to the human fall, Eve gave birth to Cain and the firstborn. So this time after the fall, the one in the position of Eve must become one with the person in the position of Abel. Do you understand? So Rebekah in the position of Eve became one with Jacob in the position of Abel. By cheating the father and son, she had Jacob inherit the blessing of father and son. One is in the place of God on the spiritual level, the other in the position of the world on the spiritual level. So the reverse order was made here by inheriting the blessing. In the beginning, by Eve and Cain becoming one, and Eve giving birth to the evil son, the restoration was nullified. So in the course of restoration, Rebekah in the position of Eve, by becoming one with Jacob in the position of Abel, reversed that or reversed the order. The failure of what was undone, and the blessing was inherited. So by Rebekah's becoming one with Jacob and restoring the blessing, heaven won. In Christianity, no one has ever taught that fact to the people. That's true. I think Christians cannot explain the situation with Jacob. I mean, he lied, he cheated, right? He lied and cheated. So, why is that even in the Bible? But Father says that Jacob's course is the model course for subjugating Satan, naturally subjugating Satan. So Jacob is probably, among the most important people in the Bible. Abraham and Moses, of course, and Noah and all that, but Jacob, extremely important. In Christianity, no one has ever taught that fact to the people, so that they have been entirely ignorant about Jesus' lineage. Morality or ethics were all nullified then in shifting the lineage. Mother cheated father and again cheated her firstborn Jacob. Firstborn cheated her firstborn. Jacob had to cheat his elder brother. But at all costs, those central figures had to link the blood lineage in purity. So that kind of cheating had to take place. In doing so, was Jacob right or wrong? I know it may sound paradoxical, but we read in the Bible that we must be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. The first serpent stained man by causing him to fall. In doing that, he cheated man. So in restoring man from the evil sovereignty, we must cheat. If Esau had surrendered to Jacob at that point, the restoration could have been accomplished. But let's not forget the wise as doves part, or innocent as doves part either. Okay, wise as serpents, innocent as doves. So let's not forget that part. People sometimes only focus on the wise as serpents part. If Esau had surrendered to Jacob at that point, the restoration could have been accomplished. But because Esau hated Jacob and wanted to kill him, Jacob had to flee to Haran. And then after 21 years of hard work, while he was on his way back, he was faced with the angel who was trying to fight with him. And by winning over the angel, by wrestling, he gained the name Israel, meaning victor. And that being done on the spiritual level, he could then win over Esau on the physical level in actuality. That was the starting point of the Israelite nation, the name Israel, signifying victory. What was left unaccomplished in Adam's family must be restored in Jacob's family, from Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and down to the family of Jacob. Jacob won over the family of Esau, and the shift of the birthright was accomplished. Jacob was successful in winning the birthright to his side, being the second-born. There was a success there, but it was done after they had reached maturity. They restored the lineage at their maturity. So a portion was left unrestored. Rebekah, when she found out that the twin brothers were fighting with each other, she told God that there were two forces fighting with each other in her womb. And God said that those were two nations fighting each other, and the second-born would win over the first, and the first would have to serve the second. Symbolically, that showed the possibility of two powers, one on the good side and one on the evil side, having to fight against each other. The restoration was possible when they were born as twin brothers, but something else must be done there. The restoration must be done while those two powers are still in their mother's womb. And of course, today, we are still in a position where we have good and evil fighting each other. And of course, Father has already won, and on the cosmic perfection level. And so that essential victory has been won. And so I'm confident that regardless of the evil spell that has been placed on the world by who, still this is all going to work out. That maybe some sacrifice, maybe a lot of sacrifice will be necessary, but it's going to work out, and I think it's going to work out in a fairly short order now. At this point, we must also have a person in the place of Eve. That was Tamar. Tamar was in the position to have to cheat the father and son. But what kind of woman was she? She was, and again, this is another story in the Bible that Christians cannot figure out. How come this story is even in the Bible? And how is it that Jesus came from this kind of lineage? Well, what kind of woman was she? She had to deny the father and the son. Tamar was the daughter-in-law to Judah, Judah's first son. Tamar's first husband died. According to the Jewish custom, she would have to marry the second son, but he died too. The third son of Judah was too young for her. Well, at least that's what Judah said. What could she have done to keep the lineage? She had to come together with her father-in-law. So she disguised herself as a harlot and waited for her father-in-law to come back from the field where he worked during the day. In that case, Tamar had to deny the father-in-law relationship of Judah, denying father and son. She had to deny the father and son relationship. The only thing she had in mind was how to connect the blood lineage under heaven, under God's blessing. So if Tamar had not done what she did, then Judah's lineage would have ended, and Jesus would not have come from that lineage, and God would have had to arrange something else. God would still have sent the Messiah, but it would have had to. God would have had to do another way. So it was important that the lineage of Judah continue. That was most dear to her more than anything else in the whole world. She knew she had to restore the blood lineage at all costs, even if to be with her father-in-law meant to kill herself. At that time, if one committed adultery, immorality, he or she was destined to be stoned to death. But she was ready to do that at the cost of her own life. By doing that, she was going to reverse what had to be committed in Adam's family, what had been committed in Adam's family. After joining, and I don't think Tamar was aware of this. Her focus was on continuing the lineage of Judah. Of course, she did not know that the Messiah was going to come through that lineage. She did not know that the full providential significance of what she was doing, but she was basically doing the right thing. And she was acting according to her conscience and putting her life on the line for the sake of the lineage of Judah and house of Judah, the tribe of Judah. After joining with her father-in-law, she was wise enough to ask for some signs of that night. She received the cane, or the staff, I guess, or the seal, and sheep. Then she conceived a child. Her physical appearance soon showed to everyone that she was pregnant. Rumors spread, and her father-in-law was furious. He was ready to have the people stone her to death. At that very moment, Tamar showed him those three things, saying that the child conceived in her womb was the son of the father who gave her those things. Judah was surprised to realize what happened. He knew that he was the father to the child and could say or do nothing to her. From then on, the providence of God was going to be realized. The child was conceived in that manner, and in the very womb of Tamar, twin brothers were fighting each other in this case too. When Tamar prayed before God, the same message came from God, that she had two nations fighting with each other in her womb, and the elder would have to serve the younger. The time for the moment of deliverance came, and the elder was going to come out first. He let his hand out. He put his hand out, he put his fist out, and the midwife fastened some red thread to the wrist. Something very strange happened. He drew the arm back into the mother's womb, signifying that communism was going to appear in the world, the red thread. After the first one drew his hand back, then by pushing him aside, the second born came out first. His name was Perez. Perez was born first. The name Perez means the one who came out by nudging aside his brother. This is the first occasion in human history in which the birthright was shifted right in the mother's womb. Through the woman Tamar, for the first time in history, the shift of blood lineage was successful. Right in the mother's womb, the birthright from the elder to the younger was shifted. What is taking place in the mother's womb means to have gotten rid of the condition of indemnity. So the shift of blood lineage was possible there and from then on. Then if Perez was born that way, why wasn't God able to send the Messiah right there? Up to that period, they had to restore what had been lost during 2,000 years. So at that point in the satanic world, the people had multiplied to form a nation. So God had to send the Messiah on a national basis, and the people were not prepared yet. So he had to prepare the nation to be chosen, to be the chosen nation to receive the Messiah. Centering on the lineage of Judah, people multiplied to form the nation of Israel. In view of that law, from what lineage, from what tribe was Jesus destined to be born? He had to be born, he had to be a descendant of Judah's lineage. So all the Israelites think highly of their tradition and their blood lineage set up by Tamar. Tamar's idea and thought must be linked down to the point where they form a nation. At that point, there must come out a woman in the position of Tamar who would think more highly of blood lineage than of anything else. That was Mary. She had to go through the same thing. Mary had her own father and her own husband. Mary, again, is in the position of Eve, but before the fall, Adam and Eve were in the position of brother and sister. They were in the engaged stage. Mary and Joseph were in the relationship of engagement. When Eve was in the stage of betrothal to Adam, taken away by the evil force, she had to do something similar to that. So while she was in the stage of betrothal to Joseph, Mary had to bear a child out of a different lineage. An angel appeared before Mary, predicting the coming of the child under God. Then Mary said, I know no man, then how can I bear a child? Then the Bible says the angel told her that she had in her womb, what she had in her womb was of the Holy Spirit, was of God, instead of Satan. God would have something to do with the conception and make her link into the lineage of God. She was the one of those born out of the lineage of the baby conceived in Mary's womb. She was one of those born out of this lineage, and the baby conceived in Mary's womb had nothing to do with sin. The baby was coming without anything to do with the stained blood lineage. So even while it was yet in her womb, she could love the baby. And at that time of his birth, and at the time of his birth, he was the first and only one to be loved by God to the full extent, and that is why God called him his only son. This man can be called the true olive tree. Then you can imagine how difficult it was for God's providence to make that a reality, to purify the blood lineage. Do you find that true, or do you think that is a fabricated story by a true father? What took place far back in human history under God's providence is truthful here. And with Father in the center of the mission, we are going to carry out the things which should have been accomplished by Jesus himself. Without the knowledge of all those things, can you deny the existence of God working behind the people and having people work in such a way that his ideal can be realized? Can you deny the existence of God at all? You may want to deny it, true Father, but with the fact that he discovered this truth alone, you can at least name him to be the world leader and the prophet of prophets. I deserve your belief in me, your following me. There have been saints, prophets, many religious leaders and theologians in past history, human history, but not a single one of them has been able to find out that theory, that truth. So Father here is more than any of those people and greater than Jesus himself. Don't stain the dignity of God by acting foolishly. You must think highly of your situation, of what you are, and you must keep the dignity of God. With the authority and dignity of God, you must build yourself, your family, your tribe, your nation, and the whole world under God. Is everything clear so far? Joseph, in that case, was in the place of the archangel. So was Joseph in the position to be in the position to be able to live with Mary? With that done, with those things accomplished now, with that done, with those things accomplished, now that Master is here, that Father is here leading you, if you devote yourself to him, cooperate with him, obey him in every possible way, and follow him, you can make the whole world centered on God, and there will be no communists. Only godly people will build the whole world on earth. That way, we can erect the kingdom of God on earth. We will be the first citizens of the kingdom to enjoy that. Are you ready to go that way, despite all the costs you have to pay? If you're unwilling to do that, something miserable will happen to you and to your future descendants, because this has got to be realized on earth. Even though you may pass away to the next world, you will have to do that again. You are in the position of the diseased, and you need a physician, and Father is in that position. If you are a patient with an incurable disease, almost hopeless, would you not obey your physician in order to be cured? Even though you may have to drink bitter medicine, you have to do that. If he's going to give you a diagnosis and give you an injection, you have to let him do that on your arm, your hip. Even you are virgin girls, you have to show him any part of your body. If you want to be engrafted to the pure lineage, would you do that on the individual level or on the family level? For you to be blessed in holy matrimony by Father, it is best. Then would you expect him to bless you in the holy marriage? Would you want to be blessed? Sometime later, I will tell you the significance of our mass weddings. For a while, we have to have mass weddings instead of blessings of single couples. In marrying, so for a while, he says, okay, so today, this era has passed. And the second king, of course, is not doing mass weddings per se, but as people come forward, sometimes more, and there's actually going to be there's actually going to be a blessing now in Taiwan in a few days, and some couples are getting ready for that right now. For a while, we have to have mass weddings instead of blessings of single people. In marrying people too, I think single couples. I'm sorry. In marrying people too, I want to have it on the worldwide level. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, though they were only two, they represented the whole world. Master wants to have wedding ceremonies on the worldwide level in front of all the people of the world. In the next wedding ceremony, he may bless 2,000. So after 73, the next wedding ceremony, next blessing was the 1800 couple blessing in 1975. I believe that was February 1975. Anyway, not quite a number, but some people from the United States and Europe went to that, participated in that. In the next wedding ceremony, he may bless 2,000 or more couples from all over the world. If so many nations participate in the mass wedding, it means that upon the formation of your family, you have something to do with so many nations, and you are connecting your family to many other families or tribes in so many other nations. Would you like to have a mass wedding? Today, I've talked a lot, but the main point is that by the blessing, we have to engraft ourselves to the purified blood lineage. And by going through those stages, you are shifted to individuals and families under God's lineage. This is a privilege and glory, so you must be grateful and must glorify God for it. In going this way, you may have to be placed in hardship and trials, but you must go the way in gratitude. Are you ready for that? You want to erect your family, engrafted to the lineage of God, and you will erect your family, your tribe, and the whole world under that lineage. You must do anything for that, not complaining, but glorifying and praising God. Praise God. So that is the end of that speech. Let's go back here to the section where he talks about the birth of Jesus, or where Jesus is conceived. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Okay. And Father sort of glosses over a lot here. He does not talk about Zechariah being the biological father of Jesus, or Zechariah providing the Y chromosome for Jesus. And of course, later on, he does that. Of course, we are now teaching that openly in OSTP. And the relationship between Zechariah's family and Jesus's family. But one thing that it's important to understand here, because this is something that the Family Federation has twisted and is teaching incorrectly, is how it is that Jesus could be conceived in Mary's womb. And as Father says here, the angel said to Mary that what was in her womb was of God, a Holy Spirit. In other words, when Mary and Zechariah had a relationship, when they had sexual intercourse at the home of Zechariah, um, God was also present there. God had the condition to be present there. And of course, Mary's womb could also have the condition to conceive in this way. Now, Jesus had uh, other siblings. They were the children of Joseph, we assume. But now the Family Federation tries to say that Father was born with original sin, and as one of the arguments justifying, they say, well, look, Father's parents, physical parents, had several children, and how can you say that only Father would be born without original sin? And this is a clear misunderstanding of principle and of Father's teaching. And it is and their lie is something, their falsehood, their lie is something that may convince people who are not really thinking very carefully about Father's teaching. But in the particular time and place and the circumstance in which Father was conceived was a time and place in which God has the condition in order to be there and to participate in that conception process. And so that is why Father in that case could be born, could be conceived without original sin, because God was also there in that situation. And in the other siblings, he was not. That's it. That's all. Okay? So that was a special situation where God could be present, and it was the same situation with Mary. And so this idea that Family Federation is trying to propagate, that Father was born with original sin, is completely false. Apparently, what they're teaching now. Well, let me tell you my own experience. When Hak Ja Han was deposed in 2019 by our lawyer asked her directly whether Father was born with original sin, and she gave a vague answer, like, well, I don't think you can really say that Father was necessarily born without original sin, or something like that, a vague answer. What they are apparently teaching now is that Father's original sin was removed by Jesus when he met Jesus the Easter morning, but then he fell again by marrying Songjin's mother, that is Che, what was her name? By Mrs. Che. Suddenly I forgot her name. I should know it, but I do know it. I just can't, it's not all, by Mrs. Che anyway. And then that original sin was removed a second time by Hak Ja Han. And Hak Ja Han was born without original sin. So this is a complete fabrication to serve the interest of Hak Ja Han for power and for position. And it is completely false, by the way. It's completely false. Certainly, they try to say that, well, Hak Ja Han is the third generation of only daughter, and therefore she has no original sin. There's no basis. There's no basis for saying that. Absolutely, there's no basis for that at all. Unfortunately, some people are taken in by that. Quite a lot of people actually are taken in by that. One very painful situation for us right now in our family is that we have a person in our tribe who is saying, well, I cannot go to sanctuary. I cannot change my allegiance to the sanctuary because I have I've been a faithful follower of Father, or faithful follower for 30 years. But my question would be, okay, what kind of faith? What is the content of that faith? Because it's certainly not the principle. Certainly not the principle. And I think many people, and Father, if you look at Chen Sung Gyung, there's a place where Father says this. He says, I know there are many people in the church who are not here because of the principle. They're here because they like me. They like to be with me. And yeah, that's true. And that is so true. And they just, have, without really thinking for themselves very deeply about the whole theological thing about, divine principle, they just sort of sleep through the divine principle, maybe even sleep through OSDP sessions and say, oh, yeah, okay, I attended a 40-day workshop. But they don't understand anything. They say, I mean, how can you understand the principle and still be in the Family Federation today? That would be a total contradiction. There's no way that a person who understands the principle in any kind of depth could possibly allow themselves to remain in the Family Federation today. Clearly, the second king, Hyung Jae-moon, is the inheritor and the heir of true father. And people may not like some of the things he does. Okay, maybe you don't like guns. Okay. But in the United States, right? Not everybody likes Donald Trump, right? That's an understatement, right? But they still say he's president. And so the fact that someone doesn't like something that the second king is doing does not excuse their denying his position as father's representative and heir. It does not excuse it. And when they get to spirit world, father's going to ask them. And he's going to say, well, how come you didn't try to help my representative and heir? Because if you deny father's representative and heir, you are denying father. I'm sorry, that's the fact. That's the fact. That is the fact. We all have to go to spirit world. And when we do, as Blessed Center families, or as former Blessed Center families, because those who are still in the Family Federation are no longer Blessed Center families. But when we do go to spirit world, we're going to have to face Father, and we're going to have to go through the process of judgment for the choices that we have made. All right, gotta go. I'll see you tomorrow. And let's see, this ends our study of the three speeches after exactly the 10th week. And next week we will do something else. God bless, Godspeed. May